Okay, so the outline of this, or the story of the talk. So of course we talk today a bit about Bitcoin wallets, and there was this idea to put Bitcoin wallets in SGX, because SGX is a secure enclave, it protects everything, and then everything is safe. But in the past we already have performed some attacks where we spy on SGX, and today we will outline a bit how that works now.
So for those of you who do not know SGX, so this is the secure enclave. It's a new Intel extension, and Intel suggests you have your application and you have an untrusted part of your application, and then you have a trusted part, and in this trusted part you can do stuff that no one can see. So it's completely invisible to anyone, it's encrypted, and you can use it in a way you create this trusted part. If you want to execute something in there, you call this trusted function, it goes through a call gate, executes all the stuff in the trusted part, no one sees what's going to happen in there, and then if the trusted part is done, it returns to the untrusted part and you can continue with the result of the computation. And the nice thing, Intel considers the operating system to be malicious, so not even the operating system can influence the trusted part in any way. So you have no way of seeing what's going on there, what's executed, which data is used or anything. And you cannot manipulate anything that's going on in a trusted part. Yeah, so it's a nice thing. Let's put our money in there. So we can build Bitcoin wallets in SGX. And there are also some examples already. There's this Ledger SGX enclave for blockchain applications. Then there's a Bitcoin wallet, BitPay, CoPay. They do everything in SGX. And then there's this paper about T-Chain, a payment channel using SGX. And they have an interesting note in their paper. They say, okay, we assume the trusted execution environment, so in this case SGX, guarantees to hold and do not consider side channel attacks on the trusted execution environment. Such attacks and their mitigations are outside the scope of this work.
Now imagine you put money into a safe, into a real world safe. And the manufacturer says, yeah, if someone takes a stethoscope and listens where the clicking noises are and opens the safe, that's out of scope of our threat model. You wouldn't buy this safe. You would not do that. But here it seems perfectly legal to say, yeah, this is out of scope. So let's talk about RSA, because actually we performed an attack on RSA earlier this year, and RSA works very simple. You just do an exponentiation modulo some number, and the easiest way, or one of the easiest ways to do that, is a square and multiply algorithm. So depending on the bit of the exponent, if it's a 1, then you square and multiply, and if it's a 0, then you only square. So you apparently have some different control flow there, some different instruction stream there. So you can sense these differences if you can measure whether the multiply was executed or not. And then you directly have the bit stream of the key. So in these Bitcoin wallets, typically they use ECDSA and not RSA, and this is used to sign transactions, and the point multiplication in ECDSA is very similar to an RSA exponentiation. So here we had square and multiply in RSA, and in ECDSA we have double and add, which works in exactly the same way, just with double and add instead of square and multiply. So we can perform the same attack. Perfect. Very important here, both algorithms have secret dependent memory accesses. If an algorithm has secret dependent memory accesses, we can exploit it. If it doesn't, then we probably can't exploit it this way. One way to exploit secret dependent accesses is the Prime+Probe cache attack. It has been performed in many different scenarios, and in one case is you perform it on a local machine, so we did that in our paper, on SGX. And the fundamental idea of Prime+Probe is that you exploit a timing difference when accessing data. Cache data, then it's fast, so the memory access is served from within the CPU, so it's very fast. Or uncached data, so it has to be fetched from the DRAM, which is very slow in comparison. And depending on whether it was fast or slow, you can then determine whether it was already in the cache or not. So this leaks whether the victim in the recent past has loaded something into the cache or not. If it's fast, then the victim must have loaded it into the cache. If it's slow, then not. The attack here works on a cache set. So this is a part of the CPU cache, and it's shared across CPU cores. So this part of the CPU is shared across cores, so we can perform the Prime+Probe attack cross cores. So you have your Bitcoin SGX enclave running on one core, and our attacker runs on the other core, and they are not really isolated. They work on the same cache. Let's go through an illustration of this attack. So here we have the attacker address space and the victim address space on the right side. In the middle we have the cache, and the attacker now fills the cache with its own memory locations. It only performs memory accesses, so this is nothing very suspicious. Filling a cache set with your own data, right? And then the victim is scheduled, and the victim performs some computation which performs secret-dependent memory accesses. And depending on where the accesses go, they might go into the same cache set, and then the attacker can re-access all of its own memory locations, and then the attacker finds that some of them are slow to access. So the victim must have accessed something that goes to the same cache set. And then the attacker knows what the victim did. Okay, can we build an attack out of that?
Sure, so that sounds like we can do an attack. We have this secret-dependent memory accesses, and we have this attack where we exploit that. So how does our attack setting look? We have our victim. In our victim, we have this SGX enclave, where the wallet is in there. So we have the signature in there with the private key. That's all perfectly protected by SGX. And now we have an attacker. And we also use SGX on the attacker side. And we put our attack in SGX. So
why do we do that?
Why would we do that?
So the reason here is, you remember the talk about Mt. Gox earlier this day? Putting the attacker inside an SGX enclave makes sure that we leave no traces, because no one can inspect what an SGX enclave does. So we leave no traces here. This is really nice.
So we have the perfect attacker here that also is completely invisible and not traceable anymore. So we abuse this enclave technology not only to protect the wallet, but also to protect the attacker from being discovered here. And so we have these two, the attacker and the victim, running on different cores. But as said before, we have the shared last level cache, so we can mount our Prime+Probe attack from our attacker, now in SGX, completely invisible, to the victim running the SGX wallet, also completely invisible and protected.
Okay, but so far I explained the theoretical attack, right? So this cannot be mounted within SGX. Okay, and I have some reasons why it cannot be mounted in SGX. First, for a Prime+Probe attack, you need high precision timers. The cache is very fast, so you need a cycle accurate timing primitive. And we don't have that in SGX because it's forbidden for security reasons. Apparently Intel was aware that there might be security problems within SGX enclaves, so they blocked this instruction, at least in the first version. We also don't have any syscalls, so we cannot just ask the kernel for information that we need. For instance, we need information on physical addresses. And we can't query the kernel and ask, okay, please tell us which physical address belongs to this virtual address. We also don't have any shared memory, so we can't perform more powerful cache attacks. There are more powerful cache attacks if we have shared memory, but we don't have that here. Yeah, as I said, no physical addresses. We can't get this information of physical addresses, so we can't perform the attack. And finally, we also don't have any 2 megabyte large pages. For that part, you need to know that the lowest 21 bits of a large page are identical in virtual memory and in physical memory. So we know 21 bits of the physical address. That would be already enough to perform our attack. But we don't have that here, so we can't do that.
So you say we can't do that in SGX?
Yeah.
But what if we just build our own timer? So we don't have the timers available from Intel, but who is going to prevent us from building our own timer? So, I mean, the timer must be quite good to measure the differences between cache hits and cache misses. We need something in a resolution in the order of cycles, so it must be a really accurate timer. But what about this idea? So we just start a thread that continuously increments a global variable. So we have a global variable that is in a while true loop incremented, and use that as a timestamp.
That can never be fast enough. That cannot achieve cycle-accurate measurements.
You mean just because we code it ourselves with a lot of code?
Yeah, it's a for loop incrementing a variable. That will never work.
Okay, let's see. It's even 15% faster than a native timestamp counter that Intel forbid.
I thought Intel optimized that part.
Yeah, it's thanks Intel, it's really nice. So we get an actually even faster and better timer than the one we would have actually used. Okay, so this sounds like a solved problem, right?
Okay, but this is one problem, right? But we still have the problem that we don't have the physical address and we can't determine the cache set, right? We have no knowledge about physical addresses at all. So this is really, really troublesome here. Can we do anything about that?
There was an interesting work. So the DRAM also leaks some timing information, and maybe we can use this timing leaks in the DRAM to get knowledge of physical addresses.
But you would need physical addresses to do this attack, right?
Yeah, but maybe we can find a neat trick. I mean, now we have a really good timer, so we can again exploit timing differences, not in the cache, but in the DRAMs. And with these timing differences, we can find the borders in the DRAM. So there are rows in there, and they have borders, and we can see them with timing differences when we access them. And if we know a row border, then we also know 18 bits of the physical address, and then we can determine the cache sets. So sounds like a plan. And so if we look at that, it's quite complicated how such a 4 kilobyte physical page that we think is one chunk of memory is actually again divided into more parts in the DRAM. So the DRAM has some rows and banks and channels, and such a 4 kilobyte page is then split into different rows in the DRAM again. Looks something like that. And the newer, the more modern the CPU, the more complex this splitting is. And we can abuse that now. So if we access memory, which is in the same bank and a different row, then we have high timings. So we choose a magic difference between two memory accesses and access them alternatively. So on this image here, I tried to simplify that. We have the black lines are the row borders, and then we have the color is where in the DRAM this is located. And if we access two variables that have the same color but are in different rows, then we have a high timing. And then we can iterate over the memory, and we see we get the same colors starting exactly at row borders, so we can, with a good timer, determine where a new row in the DRAM starts. And if we have this row, we know a part of the physical address, and we can get the cache sets. So again, a nice side channel we can exploit here. And this is not only theoretic, so we tried that, and we see the results here. It actually works. So this was on our test laptop, and we see with the two red dots here, we detect exactly the row border and know at this position we have 18 bits of the physical address, and we can do our prime and probe, right?
Okay, so if we put everything together, we have a counting primitive that's good enough, we have the row border detection, and therefore we have some physical address information enough to map our cache sets, right? So we can just build an eviction set for prime and probe then, so this set where we fill the cache set then, the set of memory addresses, and then we can basically mount the entire attack.
Yeah, so we know this buffer is accessed by our signature routine, and we mount the prime and probe attack on this buffer.
So this is actually what we published as a paper earlier this year. So for the results, if you look at such a prime and probe trace, it looks like this. This is not really telling us anything,
can anyone
right?
see the key here? Yeah. Seems like it's not working.
Let's go one step further. Can anyone see the key now?
Simple post-processing, moving average. And then we just take the spikes here, and they're the ones. And if it's not a spike, it's a 0. So we can actually read the key here, and we can do that as a human, and we can also do that automatically, of course, and perfectly get through a side channel, a cache side channel attack combined with a DRAM side channel attack, get the key out of this perfectly isolated enclave which shouldn't be possible.
You shouldn't make it that easy for attackers, right? Okay, and then for the performance counters. So here you see our attack if it runs in native code. This is the regular attack code Prime+Probe on the SGX enclave.
So without the attack in SGX.
Yes.
Just run it normally.
And if we put it into SGX, then what happens? We only see a few hits there, which is basically system noise and not anything in SGX. So we can't see the attack anymore. Perfect. Perfectly hidden. So what can we do against these attacks? So we need to do something against it, right? So on a source code level, we can of course do something, use side channel resistant crypto implementations. We can do that for crypto, so we should do that for crypto. For instance, we can do exponent blinding for RSA and similar algorithms. We can use bit-sliced implementations, for instance, for AES. These are not vulnerable to cache attacks, and then you also can't steal the key if they are resistant to these attacks.
Of course, we could also do something on operating system level so that we create a secure environment. The problem here is that in this threat model, we usually do not trust the operating system. So we expect the operating system is malicious, or in easier case, we are infected with some virus, ransomware, whatever, and we cannot trust the environment. But still, it would be nice if Intel provided some way that operating systems or antivirus programs could inspect enclave code so they could actually see that there's an attack going on and stop us. Because if you can see it, if you do it in native code, it's really easy to detect and stop them. Or they could just enable performance counters like we have seen before with SGX. We don't have the performance counters, we cannot detect the attack. They could enable that. They could somehow divide the memory for the enclaves in a way that we cannot do attack from one enclave to a different enclave, which is one step, but it still allows us to mount the attack from outside an enclave to an enclave. So if the attacker does not want to be stealthy, then the attacker can still mount the attack. So not a good solution, but it's something. Randomness, always good. So add some randomness in the heap, randomize the heap, because right now the buffer is always at the same location if we do again a signature, and it's easy to attack for us. So just randomize a few of the data structures in there, and then it's a lot harder for an attacker to get the secret out. It's not impossible, you just need more tries, of course, but it makes an attack a lot harder.
Of course, at a hardware level, you can also prevent these attacks. We suggested one solution that uses Intel CAT, cache allocation technology, and that makes sure that some cache sets can only be used by one CPU core, and so you don't have the shared cache sets anymore, then you can't perform the attack. Not in this case. We suggested to combine it with the EENTER instruction that you use to enter the SGX enclave, and then the Intel CAT would be automatically activated, and then it works. Then L3 would be isolated, and we would have no leakage. The better approach would, of course, be to provide a non-shared secure memory element.
Yeah, then we could just simply put all the operations with keys in the secure memory element, and there's no way a normal side channel attack could get them out of there. So that would be a really nice solution, but it of course is additional hardware, so it costs money, and so we are not going to see that, I guess. Okay, so as a conclusion, side channels can actually cost you money. So if we steal your money, then that's quite expensive for you.
Yes, and for that reason, you should not consider them out of scope. If something can cost you money, you should not consider it out of scope in any case.
Yeah, so we have shown that it works, and if you have exploitable code, or code that you can attack using side channels, and you just put it in SGX, that does not mean your code is good, because then you have exploitable code in SGX, and exploitable SGX enclave. So SGX is not this magic solution that makes the crappy crypto implementations safe. You have to still write good software to put it into SGX so that it's actually protected with SGX.
Well, first of all, congratulations, guys, because it's not something simple to pull off. Anybody has some questions? Yeah. I was like actually expecting it, Peter. I was like, maybe these ones.
So, I mean, a lot of the exciting things about SGX are systems where, you're supposed to be able to go trust the code on another computer, such as how, T-Chan, you literally send your private keys to your counterparty's SGX enclave so that they can go and, sign on your behalf, basically. Given attacks like this, I mean, what do you think how far away are we from being actually able to go trust stuff like that?
I think sending your private key to anyone is always a bad idea. It always sounds like a bad idea.
Sounds like that's a no.
I actually have a question. I'm not that familiar with the SGX architecture, but I am familiar with your raw hammer attack. So could you combine both? So could you replace a key that I have in an SGX enclave by an attacker key through a raw hammer attack?
No, you can't actually do that because SGX has certain properties and nice security properties. So the whole memory is encrypted and it's integrity checked. So if you mount a raw hammer attack and flip some bit in the SGX memory where your key is, then the system will simply halt. It will be, okay, there's an integrity problem with the memory there, and I won't execute anymore. So you cannot change the key. So that's a good thing.
Okay, thanks. Nicolas.
Yeah, so as a developer of the Ledger SGX enclave, I just have a very, very simple question just to know if you tested it, because basically it would demonstrate the side channel. I mean, if it's possible to attack over a side channel libsec P256K1 on this architecture. So I think it's protected, but it would be nice to have your opinion on that if you actually tested it.
Yeah. We haven't looked at libsec yet, but we will take a look at it, and if it's exploitable, we can send you a message.
One more question?
So in one of the previous slides, I saw that when you want to hide in a SGX enclave the attacker, you place it on another core, but potentially could be on the same core, correct?
That also works, yeah, of course. It's just more powerful if you do not care on which core you are running.
Okay.
So you don't have to run the attack on the same core because that could be difficult. So.
Thank you very much.